This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library of
You can get the Truefire All Access Pass for as cheap as they ever do it, the $99 thing. So just jump and do that if you're looking for the best price you can get Truefire All Access for. In many ways, I'm kind of embarrassed to say that it took me until basically this year to buy an EQ pedal. I think the first time I remember, I think there was a green Dan Electro pedal that I had that was an EQ pedal, I think. But I've not had one for, decades of my playing life. And I think as someone who's like online and, supposed to be kind of serious about tone and stuff, that absolutely this should have been something that is in my arsenal all along. And I think I could have saved myself thousands of pounds. Because, you hunt around for certain drive pedals that do slightly distinct things, or maybe their EQ curve is a bit different, maybe the way their tone knob reacts is a bit different. And you try and find a thing that's going to work really well for you. All of the way, these things cost 100, 200, 300 pounds. Meanwhile, within the power of an EQ pedal, there are sort of thousands and thousands of shaping options, and I'm only going to show a very small amount of what you could maybe do with an EQ pedal in this video. But I think, like Tom Bukovac has said, it's the best boost pedal you'll ever buy. And I personally really like it as a post clipping shaping option. So many times I've been on a gig with a real amp and real pedals, and you think, this is not exactly what I wanted, and you think, if this EQ pedal had been on the board, I could have quite quickly made an adjustment, particularly if you're good with an EQ pedal. I think Joe Bonamassa has said that every musician, every guitarist should buy a 32 band EQ. I think maybe just start with, what is it, 7. And that's a good starting point, I think. Anyway, let's dig into it. There are also not many pedals that actually can teach you things about tone, right? You know, it's just... So, I got my Tube Screamer into a deluxe reverb. I'm going to show you this with a bit more drive, just because I think that's where you can really hear a difference. So, that's kind of my starting point tone. The Boss G7 has helpful mid sliders all along. So, so you can get a fairly good idea about what each thing is doing. So that's kind of mud. So those two are kind of muddy frequencies, kind of throaty. Like opening the throat. Kind of this frequency. It's very mid, that could be either a scoop tone or a mid push. Upper mid, getting towards ice pick, and then getting towards ice picky airy stuff. So if I've got my Tube Screamer here, I'm thinking that's a bit boxy. I could do some of the things like replace some of the frequencies that are maybe lost a bit. I could also use it as a boost. One of the problems that I have with the Tube Screamer sometimes is it just feels like you've kind of cut off the bottom. The other thing is sometimes it's like too much in the way of mids, so here we could start to maybe kind of fix some of those things, right? And we're just sculpting this into a drive pedal that works for us. Right, now another thing you could do would be to use this to give yourself effectively two channels. So, for example, this could be my clean. Well, 4 channels maybe. That's like a scooped clean. Now, my rhythm. Do you see, like, we could use it to kind of underboost, so taking out some of those mid frequencies that work for lead but don't necessarily work for our rhythm. So it's quite an interesting pedal in that way. You could also do things like boost 6.4K. If you found like this is a bit fluffy, particularly with this kind of tone, I find that does quite a cool thing. So without the tube screamer, scoopy type of thing. With the tube screamer. Other things you could do, which are going to be powerful in different kind of ways, switch up the order. You could of course have an EQ in the loop of your amp, the effects loop, if you have one of those. But the other thing you could do is put the EQ pre-drive and use it as a boost pre-drive, pre-clipping, or whatever you want to call it. And then this will, I guess, keep more of the flavour of the overdrive that you're using. So same sort of principle here, like underdriving it for a rhythm, but we're going to get less drive out of the pedal, right, as well. Or you could use this then as a boost for your drive. So if you were liking your tone of your tube screamer, now like a treble boost as well as a bass boost. And presume you wouldn't necessarily want to mid boost a tube screamer, but you could do this kind of thing. That sort of thing might be kind of ugly into the tube screamer because that's got that clean blend. So I think you definitely can get tons out of this. Experiment with it. I hope you can kind of see, even in this really short kind of window of time with just a tube screamer, there's like so much that you can do with the EQ pedal. Whether you decide to put it post clipping, pre-clipping, using it as a boost, or whether you decide to put it in the effects loop of an amp, I think it's really taking control of your tone in a way that so many other pedals, you're kind of, you know, like a tube screamer generally, you're stuck with whatever that kind of tone profile is going to be. Nobel's ODR1, sort of similar situation, like it's got a lot of bass on there. If you had an EQ pedal where it's like I could, you know, cut out some of those offending frequencies, or I can boost something in the higher end, or I can boost the mids a bit to get what I'm looking for. These drive pedals that you've already had for years that maybe were, all they needed was just like a little tweak, rather than buying the next boutique pedal or the next Dumble clone or whatever. The G7 I think could have saved me thousands and thousands of pounds, so that's kind of why I wanted to make this little video.